Steve Malzberg.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we can't forget with all the news that is going on regarding the Navy Yard shooting, we can't forget the rest of the news as we touched on with Stephen Moore, the economy and the possible naming of a new Fed chief. It won't be Lawrence Summers, of course. But now we turn our attention to Syria and the Middle East, and also a Senate amendment that would give the Department of Justice some power. We'll talk about all that with our next guest, who is Judy Miller, our friend and Newsmax contributor, fellow at the Manhattan Institute. Hello, Judy. How are you?
Hi. How are you, Steve?
Good. Always good to talk to you. All right. So let's start. I don't know where to start, but let's start with the UN report, long-awaited UN report out today, confirming chemical weapons use in Syria. But, of course, it's not their mandate to come up with blame or kind of peg who's responsible, and they didn't do it, of course.
No, they didn't. But if you read the 38-page report carefully, or summaries of it, which I have to say I've been reading mostly the summaries today, you can kind of only draw the conclusion that this had to be the work of Syrian government forces, that this is President Bashar Assad's fault, and it's, that because only really his forces had the kind of capability to conduct such a strike, and it's I think it we don't have to have the UN assign blame. The United States and its allies have quickly done that. Russia, of course, who's president in the op-ed pages of the New York Times, said last week that it wasn't the Syrian government which had done this. It had to be the rebels. Has not changed its position. Russia's ambassador said that today that there were too many, quote, unanswered questions to draw such a conclusion. But I think most of the world is drawing the obvious conclusion. If it was the forces, though, I mean, there may be, but there are people who say that Assad may not have ordered it personally, and it might have been, rogue forces, whatever. That's true. It could be. Yeah. I mean, we don't know a lot about the intelligence that persuaded the Americans and its allies, Obama's allies, that it was, the Syrian, that it was Assad. They have asserted that it was the senior level leadership. But I think that, we do. If there is an intercept of Assad giving the order, I'm not aware of it. No, none of us are. Yeah. Okay. So I think, but the issue is, if it was his forces, whether or not there was a rogue group or not, he has accountability. He must be held accountable for it and responsible for it. But under the plan that's now shaping up to disarm Syria of weapons that it didn't even acknowledge it had until this week, it's not clear that any price will be paid for this attack and the other attacks which we believe the Syrian government conducted. Right. You know what I've said for the past week or more. I said I would have taken him to task for this harshly, and I'm against us doing anything in Syria. But at this point, I would have preferred, looking back, that at Monday morning quarterbacking, that he would have come before the American people, the president, and said 3 hours ago, I ordered a strike, blah, blah, blah. Here's why. It's done. It's over. This thing is just totally insane. Well, as the president himself said, we journalists sometimes and politicians in Washington and congressmen and senators get too wrapped up in process, and that, yes, he conceded in a series of interviews that he's been doing that the process was messy, as he called it. But the chaos, the disorganization, the fumbling, all appear to have put the United States in a, quote, better place, which is not his words, these are mine, better place where, we're not going to have a military strike whose strategy, the point of which is kind of still hasn't been made clear. So I think I'm kind of with you, and I had grave doubts that a a military strike per se would solve any problems, and absent a coherent articulation of a strategy of what it was supposed to accomplish, I think a lot of Americans had second thoughts about it. They were, and they never changed their views on that. In fact, the more the president spoke,
the worse
it
was.
got for him.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
But on the other hand, if you're going to do something in terms of the neighborhood, which I have covered a lot, Israel and Syria's neighbors, and there are some really profound questions being asked about America's ability to keep its word. And in that sense, the scenario that you sketched out was that he should have just done this, and answered questions and reported to the Congress later. I mean, in terms of the neighbors, that's certainly what many people are telling me, and in Jordan and in Israel and in Turkey, where there's an automatic assumption that the United States can be counted on to protect them and defend their interests in defending our own. So, we are now in a very, very precarious place where I think the clear implication of what's happened is that for whatever reason, and I think that Putin is a kind of strategist, and I think we do understand his strategy at this point, is that the acceptance of the Putin-Obama or Kerry-Putin proposal to disarm Syria of chemical weapons has now made America Bashar's partner, and he's going to remain there. And some people may think that's a good thing because the alternative to his leadership may very well be Al-Qaeda, whom the United States has been fighting for the past 12 years.
Yeah, just insane.
But it's just there's such chaos and disorder in American foreign policy that our neighbors are dismayed and appalled. And even though many people didn't want a pointless military strike, there is some question about where we're going. What does this policy aim to do? I mean, I have to declare myself as a person who's long favored non-proliferation in WMD, of being extremely satisfied, very satisfied, no matter how it happened. I agree with the president that no matter how it happened, it is a very good thing that Syria has agreed to disarm itself of chemical weapons.
But do you believe that?
However, speaking to the people who've actually done it in Iraq and in other places in the former Soviet Union, I have the gravest of doubts that it can be done. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't try, and that the United States, it's not incumbent on us now to make a good faith effort to do this, but I don't think we should have any illusions about how dangerous and how implausible such a disarmament would be in the midst of a vicious civil war.
Right, and it could involve, if it were to get to this point, even if the weapons are in fact still there, all of them, or even some of them, it could involve American boots on the ground, with maybe in conjunction with others, in trying to get those weapons out, and that's a dangerous situation, as you described. It's a civil war going on.
Yeah, we keep hearing that there won't be any American boots on the ground, but I don't see, absent some kind of international boots or American boots, and we would certainly be part of that, how international inspectors could be protected. I don't see how the material can be moved out of Syria. I don't see how it could be destroyed in place, given what's going on the ground. And so I await further details. I just, mark me down, Steve, along with you in the kind of skeptical and deeply worried category.
Yep, absolutely. We're talking to Judy Miller here on the Steve Malzberg Show. A couple of other things real quick. And one is that the president is acknowledging that he's exchanged letters with the new president of Iran, and it's leading to speculation that this could lead to talks between the president or between the U.S. and Iran on their nuclear program. And then I see that Putin is going to Tehran to talk about nukes with the Iranians. I mean, maybe the Iranians are encouraged by what they're seeing here, the chaos in our foreign policy, the willingness to trust Syria, after they probably know Syria moved most, if not all, of the weapons and willing to call it a victory, maybe they're saying, hey, I'll take a piece of that, and who knows?
Well, I think that you have to take a step back, and ever since the election of President Rouhani, which no one in the intelligence community predicted, by the way, yet again, it was obvious that there was going to be a renewed emphasis on a diplomatic solution to the Iranian nuclear effort. I mean, that it's been in the cards ever since that election. So I don't see that, I think we could have expected it. We should expect it. And once again, when you look at the military options, as Israel has, as American strategists have, and you look at how hard it would be to really destroy, if not even defer, Iran's nuclear program through military action, I think we have to see what can come out of talks with the new Iranian government without having any illusions or maintaining a lot of skepticism. But I think this is the only wise course to pursue. And it's interesting to me that Putin is now trying to put himself yet again front and center in the middle of this process. This is the new Nobel Prize aspirant Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, true.
Joining the other Nobel Prize winner, Barack Obama.
I know. God help us. Anyway, one more. There's an amendment that's moving through the Senate Judiciary Committee that would allow the government essentially to determine who is a journalist for purposes of legal protection of sources. Protecting a source, a journalist under the law would be anyone who works or worked for an entity or a service that disseminates news information. In other words, they kind of want bloggers and citizen journalists, quote unquote, to not be included under that protection. How do you feel about that? As someone
I'm not sure that that's the way I interpret that.
Okay.
I think it's the language is written as written. The language would include a lot of bloggers, and if they it's a very functional definition, and it I think it's certainly a broader definition than the first go around on the Shield law, and this is, of course, something I'm deeply concerned about, given my 85 days in jail to protect a source.
But you're right. It would cover bloggers and citizen journalists if their intent was to disseminate information.
Exactly.
Yeah, but the Justice Department would get to determine whether their primary intent was news distribution or they had a political axe to grind or political point of view kind of. So I mean that gets
I'm not sure that's the way this legislation
that's how I
come
read
out.
it. Okay.
Dianne Feinstein, who has been quite tough on this, is pretty comfortable with the language. The Reporters Committee, the former chairman of the Reporters Committee, is Lucy Dalglish. Thinks the language is pretty good. It's certainly broader than what we had before. I think a lot of people are troubled by the notion that the government would be defining who is and who is not a journalist. But there's a trade-off here, Steve. If we don't do that, then nobody's going to get protection from being hauled before grand juries, from being asked about our sources in trials. I mean, we've got to do something to protect journalists. There are now in 49 out of 50 states that have provided some kind of, shield protection for journalists so that we can go on having a First Amendment in this country.
Right.
But the federal government provides no such protection. And so people like me, like James Rosen, like Jim Risen, Jana Winter, the other people who are now have fought or are fighting efforts to keep their sources secret would be greatly helped in some instances by this legislation. My concern is, of course, in national security cases, there is a balancing test, and we're likely to lose that. But at the moment, most interactions between journalists and the government do not involve national security, and a federal shield law would be enormously helpful in such cases. And yes, we will have to define who is and who is not a journalist. So I've been pushing for as broad a definition as possible.
And that's two pieces of one report and one piece of legislation that you've read completely, and I have not. The UN report and this, and it shows in this interview.
Oh, I know. I've only read a summary.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Judy, thank you very much.